First off, I want to thank you all for the amazing support you've shown to the podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe to most advanced, featured, and accurate quick podcast summaries on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. It will save you from spending 15 to 20 hours per week catching up. It's a great way to stay informed while saving time for less than the price of candy in most places. Here's a rundown on how nervous people can perform under pressure, featuring Steve Magness by Chris Williamson. Chris Williamson and Steve Magness discuss the concept of elite performers who have the talent to become world-class, but lack the inner game to actualize their potential.
Steve Magness believes that this is a more common phenomenon than people realize, and he's seen it in athletes who are incredibly talented but couldn't express that talent due to their own mental limitations.
Chris Williamson brings up the example of British singer Lewis Capaldi, who has struggled with anxiety and pressure after the success of his first album. Capaldi's story illustrates the unseen price of success, where one's own expectations and the pressure to perform can become overwhelming.
Steve Magness explains that when someone achieves success, their identity shifts from being a person expressing their talent to being a person known for being creative or talented. This shift can lead to a sense of being trapped by one's own success, making it difficult to produce something new or follow up on previous achievements. The conversation also touches on the idea that rapid success can be a curse, as it sets a new minimum bar for future performances. This can lead to a sense of pressure and anxiety, as seen in the case of child film stars or athletic prodigies who struggle to live up to their early success. Steve Magness shares his own experience as a high school athlete who felt the pressure of being the #1 junior athlete in the United States and how it affected his mindset. The discussion then delves into the internal biological and neurochemical systems that contribute to pressure and performance. Steve Magness explains that pressure is a reaction to stress, and that our brain predicts how we'll handle a challenge based on our past experiences and preparation. He notes that a little bit of stress can actually help performance, but too much can lead to anxiety and fear. The direction of stress, whether it's directed towards challenge or threat, is determined by our biology, genetics, and past experiences. Steve Magness further explains that our brain uses evidence to predict our ability to handle a task, and that preparation and training can influence whether we perceive a challenge as a threat or an opportunity. He also notes that social and cultural factors, such as the pressure to perform on social media, can exacerbate the pressure and anxiety that people experience. If we're not prepared, our brain will likely go into threat mode, releasing cortisol and adrenaline, making us feel anxious. However, if we're prepared and feel confident, our brain will go into challenge mode, releasing testosterone and adrenaline, making us feel more focused and motivated. A study on rugby players found that when they reviewed their past performances with a stranger, their cortisol levels increased and testosterone levels decreased. This suggests that our brain is highly influenced by our environment and the people we're with. Even more interesting is that if the stranger was physically intimidating, cortisol levels increased even more. This shows that our brain is constantly reading the room and environment, and if it perceives a threat, it will default to threat mode. Looking at our past successes before a performance can also have a positive impact on our brain. It can put us in challenge mode, releasing testosterone and adrenaline, and making us feel more confident and prepared. However, it's essential to be careful about the information we're feeding our brain, especially in the sensitive window before a performance.
Chris Williamson shared a personal experience where he had to warm up his voice before a live show. This shows that our brain can be influenced by our environment and the people we're with, and that sometimes a more relaxed and social approach can be more effective.
Steve Magness emphasized that our mindset plays a significant role in how our brain responds to a task. This shows that our brain is highly influenced by our interpretation of the situation and that we can influence our biology by changing our mindset.
Chris Williamson also shared a personal experience where he had a panic attack after smelling popcorn in a taxi. He thought he was having a heart attack, but it turned out the taxi driver was just eating popcorn. This experience illustrates how our brain can create a narrative based on our past experiences and expectations, and how this narrative can influence our physiological response.
Steve Magness noted that our brain is constantly trying to make sense of the world, and that it uses external sensory information and internal feedback to decide how to respond. He emphasized that we don't experience the world directly, but rather through our nervous system, which tells us what the world means.
Chris Williamson also discussed his genetic predispositions, which showed that he clears cortisol slowly and is dominant in dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. This makes him more prone to overthinking and overachieving, but also more driven to succeed. He noted that some people are built for certain tasks, and that our nervous systems and bodies can find their way to what's most efficient and normal for us. However, sometimes we try to force ourselves into roles that aren't suitable for us, which can be detrimental to our well-being. He thinks that people have different sensitivities to things like dopamine and adrenaline, and that there's room to grow and improve within those limitations. For example, a person who's naturally more stressed out or overthinks things might not be able to perform like Michael Jordan, but they can still develop coping strategies to manage their nerve. Chris Williamson interrupts, saying that a lot of people can relate to feeling nervous before a presentation or a game, and asks Steve to share some evidence-based strategies for reframing those feelings.
Steve explains that there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but that trial and error can help people find what works for them. He suggests that simple tricks like splashing cold water on your face can help disrupt and realign your nervous system, making you feel more relaxed. Steve also talks about the importance of focus in shifting your stress response. He says that if you're feeling overwhelmed, going broad-focused can help calm you down. But if you're about to perform a specific task, narrowing your focus can help you perform at a higher level. He also mentions the role of routines in helping people prepare for tasks, and how those routines can either build confidence or reinforce anxiety.
Chris asks Steve to dig deeper into routines, and Steve explains that a good routine should gradually build up to the task at hand, both physiologically and psychologically. He shares a study that found that when people practice something they're good at, they get a boost in testosterone. But when they practice something they're not good at, they get a boost in cortisol.
Steve also talks about the importance of being around others, citing research that shows that people can outsource their emotional regulation to others, and that being around others can make difficult tasks seem more manageable.
Chris shares his own experience of being on tour with bands, and how he noticed that they seemed to have a sense of camaraderie and shared experience that helped them deal with the pressures of performing.
Steve agrees, saying that being around others can fundamentally shift how we deal with failure and setbacks.
Chris mentions a book he read called Your Brain on Love, which talks about the importance of resolving conflict quickly to avoid long-term memory storage of negative emotion.
Steve agrees, saying that this is similar to what happens when we don't dissipate negative emotions after a bad game or performance, and that social support systems can help us process those emotions and move on. Steve also talks about the concept of social recovery, which refers to the idea that being around others can help us physically and emotionally recover from difficult experiences. He cites the example of the San Antonio Spurs basketball team, which had a tradition of team dinners after games to help players bond and recover. Steve says that socializing with others can help us recover by boosting oxytocin, a hormone that works against cortisol, and that this can help us learn and grow from our experiences rather than getting stuck in negative emotion. When coaches or parents are overly critical, it can lead to a long-term fear of failure in the athlete. This fear can be so intense that it causes the athlete to shrink and perform poorly. The brain is predictive, and if an athlete has a negative experience, their brain will use that to prepare for future situations, leading to a self-fulfilling prophecy. The conversation then shifts to the importance of parents and coaches being aware of their behavior and how it affects the athletes. Steve Magness shares a personal experience of watching parents behave poorly at their kids' sports games and how this can have long-term effects on the child's mindset.
Chris Williamson chimes in, saying that this behavior can lead to kids developing a fear of failure that can last a lifetime. The discussion then turns to the role of a failure in shaping our true identity.
Steve Magness explains that our identity is shaped through exploration and commitment, and that failure is a crucial part of this process. However, when we internalize failure as a personal failure, it can lead to a fixed mindset and a fear of taking risks. On the other hand, when we view failure as an opportunity to learn and grow, it can lead to a growth mindset and increased resilience.
Chris Williamson asks Steve Magness about strategies for dealing with the fear of failure.
Steve suggests that people need to look at where their fear is coming from and detach themselves from external validation. This, he says, can help people become more resilient and less prone to fear of failure. The conversation then touches on the importance of perspective and how it can help people deal with stress and pressure. He also shares a story about Tony Hawk, who was able to overcome his fear of failure by letting go of his need to win and just enjoying the process of skating. The conversation turns to the idea of moving from a mindset of protection to one of exploration. Steve Magness explains that this involves being open to novelty, failure, and shifting perspectives. He suggests that adults need to find ways to recapture the sense of play and exploration that they had as children, whether through reading, writing, or trying new things. By doing so, people can become more resilient, creative, and open to new experiences. When it comes to values and goals, clarity is key, but research shows that process goals are more effective than outcome goals. Outcome goals can be motivating at first, but they often become a source of discouragement when progress is slow. Steve Magness explains that outcome goals can be counterintuitive, as they often become a reminder of what you haven't achieved yet. This can lead to feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem. In contrast, process goals are more inspirational and aspirational, as they focus on the journey rather than the destination. So, it's crucial to surround yourself with people who share similar values.
Chris Williamson summarizes this concept beautifully, saying that goals are intentions, not attachments, providing direction rather than a destination. The conversation also touches on perfectionism and self-sabotage, which can be damaging to our self-worth and confidence. This means shifting the focus from perfection to mastery or excellence, which is a more realistic and achievable goal. This can be as simple as doing something wrong and sitting with the anxiety that comes with it. By doing so, you can learn to accept imperfection and reduce self-sabotage.
For those interested in learning more, Steve Magness's book, The Inside Game, is available on Amazon and other bookstores. He's also active on social media, where he shares insights on mental and physical performance. As for his personal life, Steve is currently trying to survive with 2 small kids running around, but he's grateful for the opportunity to share his knowledge with others. Thank you for tuning in. Please click follow button, and just remember, subscription is only $1 per month. Leave a comment or review. Until next time, happy listening.